Okay, we have some time for questions. Yes?
Are any of you aware of a desktop e-reader simulator that's reliable and could be used to test?
Well,
JAWS?
I think if you're specifically asking about EPUB 3, which is just a development, the initial goals of the Readium project is to provide exactly that.
So it's going to be considered a reference system, and it'll work in the Chrome browser. So basically, you'll be able to fire up Chrome and use the capability. Put an EPUB 3 or an attempt at an EPUB 3 file against this, view it through the Chrome browser, and see if it works. Yeah.
Is there a target date?
There is a moving target date.
A moving target date.
Yes. When we launched the project, we were actually hoping to have, there are parts of it are demonstratable right now. We were hoping to have all the features demonstratable by BEA, which happens to be a couple days from now. So that's not happening completely. But if any of you are going to be at the IDPF Digital Book Conference on Monday and Tuesday, or BEA, there will be more announcements about this at the IDPF. It's interesting that one of the greatest areas of activity on the Readium project happens to be with the Asian publishers right now, and their goal is to have a demonstrable version for the Tokyo Book Fair in the middle of the summer. But I would think that it is moving along rapidly. It's a good group, and they're working intensively. It's a volunteer group. I mean, I should mention that technically the Readium project can't be an official IDPF activity because it's open source. So it's an open source activity, and IDPF is contributing to it and enabling it to happen, but it doesn't go through the typical IDPF kind of governance and control processes. And it's volunteer, but a lot of smart people from really good organizations, including major contributions from Google and Adobe, are happening.
Another? Yep.
I have an observation and a comment about something that I wish I knew more about. Maybe somebody here does. I understand from Rick Bowes, who is an accessibility consultant and a former SSP president, he's been trying to keep me in the loop about federal legislation that was passed some time ago and started with K-12 accessibility and comes into effect for higher education this year. Okay. And what it does is give more teeth to sort of the existing protocols for campus disability offices to request accessible versions of text from publishers. So that is coming along sort of at the same time this is going, which should dovetail really nicely. But I don't know all of the implications of what's involved. And I'm wondering if anybody in the room does.
I don't know specifically regarding the extension of this, although I do know anecdotally that I've heard from several large publishers about the increasing number of requests that they get for accessible content.
Right.
And that building in accessible content into their workflows is an increasingly important element, because corporations are legally obligated to, or at least the districts are legally obligated to provide this accessible content to their students. And so they pass those requests on to the publisher, who has to respond in some way. And if nothing else, you don't want to say to your customer base, I'm sorry, we can't help you, or we can help you maybe in 9 months after we rejigger our production process for this particular title. So building in accessibility at the outset is not necessarily hard, in the same way that good semantic tagging will help your search results down the road. Designing publications in well-formed XML helps you in a variety of ways as you move forward through the production process. Adding the accessibility layer is not the semantics for accessibility is not a significant addition as long as you do it early enough in the process.
Right. Well, one of the
retrofitting is always an unpleasant experience.
Is this a Section 508
I
that
think
you're talking about?
But one of the things that Rick pointed out is that there are a number of students who have been using this program in K through 12 who will be college freshmen in the fall when the requirement hits higher ed. So he's been doing some work with PSP, trying to help their members prepare, and we haven't really taken advantage of getting him to share his advice with SSP. So we should do that.
Okay.
And I think to reinforce a comment that Todd made, one thing that I've always been a believer in is that if you make your content more accessible according to these accessibility standards, it is better for your content for every user. It's more organized, it's more structured, it's easier to navigate. It works in more environments, etc. We have lots of anecdotal evidence of, for example, physicians that I remember a friend of mine is Kent Anderson, who was at the New England Journal of Medicine. I had him speak on the subject a couple years ago before he moved to Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery. And one of the things that they realized at New England Journal of Medicine is that the full text audio versions of their clinical practice articles were actually very popular among physicians. And it surprised everybody because they thought that the only things where this kind of audio aspect of it would be useful would be short little bursts and podcasts. But in fact, they found that physicians loved having them in an audio form. And again, the ability to navigate that audio and synchronize to it, that same XML that renders your text can be used to navigate that audio. That's why these standards are so important. Another example is for this community is scientists working in the lab, where just on the bench, they've got their hands full. They're doing things with equipment and apparatus, and it's helpful for them to listen to some procedure rather than having to read the procedure in a visual form. So lots about these standards are just really good things for your content in general. Kavi?
Hi, I'm Kaveh from River Valley. I agree. I like to listen to things as well. I'm listening to podcasts all the time. If I'm working or walking or exercising or washing dishes or whatever, it's great to use that. Slight deviation. I think looking to the future, clearly people are going to be using or consuming the content in different ways. And the DAISY stand, that's a great example. So publishers should be aware of this. And I just want to underline how important it is for the content, for the XML to be absolutely correct, for the content and the markup in the XML to be correct. I'm a little alarmed that I see publishers, or many publishers, are still thinking as a publishing as the double column where text PDF, where the footnote is in the right place and the reference at the end. That is the only thing that's really checked and proofread, and when that is ready, they're happy. And when I ask about the XML, they say, yeah, we've got XML, it's perfect. And where is it? Well, it's on this, we've got terabytes of XML. It is more important, but no one's really checking that. And I think I'm just a bit worried that there's going to be a problem in future, because we find that there's been some sort of systematic error, unfortunately. And that's going to be impossible to fix in future. It is more important, I believe, that your XML is correct. If you have a problem in your PDF, that's not a problem, because the youngsters in future, they're going to be reading it, listening to it, or reading it on their iPad. please make sure your XML is absolutely perfect. It's more important than the PDF or HTML.
Thank you, Kavi. That's a really important point. I'll just anecdotally, I'll mention a conversation I was having with a publisher yesterday who basically said, well, actually, we've been getting XML for years and years and years, but it's kind of a mess because we just got it from the vendor. We said, oh, give us XML. And so they gave us what they said was XML. And now what we realize is we've got 10 years worth of publications in garbage XML. I mean, I shouldn't say that. It's not all garbage. It's just all inconsistent. And so anyway, your point is extremely important. Absolutely.
Adherence to standards.
They got it, and they basically just thought they ought to have it, so they got it and put it away somewhere and never even looked at it.
So more validators would help with that.
Well, and also thinking about what are you planning to do with this XML? How are you going to use it? So that'll influence how you specify. One of my mantras these days is, I've actually got a third dimension of this now. People have fixated on the XML DTDs. I've been an evangelist for this since they existed. So I'm not backing off on the importance of a good schema. But the problem is publishers focus on the schema, forget about the fact that they need a specification that says, how do you apply this schema to this content to accomplish this particular end? So for a couple of years, I've been on this kick about saying, you need a specification. The schema isn't the only thing. You need a specification. Now I realize that you need something else. They're starting at the wrong point. You should start with the vocabulary. What are the pieces in your content? What are these components? What do you call them? Once you know what that is and how you're going to use this, now you can express that in a formal way in a schema. And a specification can go to a vendor to say, how do you render that? But the virtue of starting with the vocabulary is that everybody in your organization knows what those things mean. Only the XML geeks know what the XML means, but everybody knows what the vocabulary is about. So start with the focus on the vocabulary, and that very vocabulary is what goes into that class attributes and the EPUB type attributes in EPUB and in accessible content. That's what makes the content accessible, is getting that vocabulary in there. Don't get hung up on the XML model. Get your vocabulary in order. And it makes everything work easier in your organization because now everybody is calling things by the same name.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Nettie. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Rob.